We are in East Turkana, northern Kenya, and behind me you see this desert landscape, but 2.75 million years ago this was completely different. It was a lush floodplain with paleo rivers, on the banks of which our ancestors developed a practice that ensured our existence maybe. They found a way to make stone tools from bare rocks, and we find evidence of this practice not in one but in 3 layers that are separated by 300,000 years, and we are very happy to share this with the world.
Each year, the Kubi4 expedition sets out from Nairobi, crossing mountains, savannas and vast arid lowlands to reach the remote edges of the Turkana Basin. Led by the National Museums of Kenya, the Kubi4 research and training program brings together scientists and students from all around the world to uncover the deep history of our species. It was through this collaborative effort that we made a remarkable discovery at the site of Namorotukuna.
Here we are on the site of Namorotukana, an archaeological site in the Turkana Basin, where early humans made these beautiful flaked stone artifacts. At one time in the past, this was a lush environment with large rivers, lakes, and a habitat that early humans wanted to live in. And we know that they lived there because they leave behind these sharp-edged tools. Amazingly, at this locality, we have not only one layer, but you can see that the horizons go all the way up to about 2 million years ago, and we have 300,000 years of evidence of early hominins making these stone tools.
Which means hundreds of generations of people made stone tools, and we retrieve such stone tools from places that were once rivers, where the practice was probably the most common. The light yellow markings in the rocks indicate sands. These were ancient rivers, and the brown rocks represent floodplains, the margins of the rivers. And in these sands that once were deposited by rivers, we find the raw materials and the stone tools that our ancestors produced 2.75 million years ago.
This object is the equivalent of a prehistoric knife in the sense that early humans knew that this material was very good for creating sharp edges, and they found it, even though the outside probably looked a lot like this, but they knew that internally it had this glassy material, and then sliced off multiple sort of sharp edges from this, and then we can see that they then discarded it and it was quickly buried, so that we still have that sharp edge even 2.75 million years ago.
And it was these early innovations that set the stage for our ability to adapt to multiple different environments.
The oldest level that we found is 2.75 million years, and we find also one of the largest expanse in time of stone tool use, starting from 2.75 and going onwards for 300,000 years. This means a very constant practice of stone tool making, and when you look at the stone tools and you look at the raw materials, you realize these inhabitants were also extremely astute in finding the raw materials, exactly what was best for making the stone tools.
And it's just a really, remarkable find for something as old as 2.75 million years ago.
Are a continuation of this evolution that's been happening for millions of years. And especially with this study, one of the things that's really interesting is that it shows us kind of like the origins of technology. And technology is something that is so ingrained in our lives today, right? So, I mean, even thinking about things like your cell phone, right, which is very different from the sort of technology that we find that existed millions of years ago. But one of the things that's really cool is that this is the beginning of a transition in humans to being really dependent on technology. And that's something that is really unique to our species. And it allows us to do all sorts of things that other species can't do, or that we wouldn't be able to do without technology. We can live in places that we wouldn't be able to live in. We can access foods and things that we wouldn't be able to access otherwise. So it's a really important transition that continues into today. And it's one of the things that makes us unique and special today. The local community are a group that are called the Dasanich. And their culture is extremely different from ours. So just being able to, I mean, it's quite difficult to communicate sometimes because a lot of the Dasanich don't speak English and we don't speak Dasanich. So we'll have to have like translators and things like that. But just getting to know their culture, getting to train people who can then, you know, help us and be sort of like the next generation of researchers doing research in the place where they live and understanding what's actually happening. You know, what we're doing there. We're not just these weirdos that are coming in and, you know, taking things. Like, we're actually able to explain to them what we're doing and have them become involved in what we're doing, and they get really excited about it. But for me, really, like, the most fun part of all of it is really just getting to understand the culture. It's so different from ours, right? These are people that they're pastoralists. So they raise goats and things like that. They dress very different from we do. They don't have electricity, they don't have running water, right? And so the way that they live is just so different from us. But at the same time, there's so many commonalities that, you know, ways that we can sort of see our own selves in each other, if that makes sense. Which is really interesting for a people that, you know, seem so different from us, but their values and what they care about is so similar to us. And so just getting to know people who live a life that is so different from ours is something that I find extremely fascinating and extremely valuable. And I think that they enjoy learning about us as well. They think we're really weird, which we probably are, but so we work in a place in northern Kenya, which is extremely remote. So when you get to Kenya, the main city in Kenya is Nairobi, and then we have to drive from Nairobi to our field site, and it takes 3 days to get there. And it's really like, there's no roads almost, you know, for most of the time that we're driving there. So it's a really difficult place to work. I mean, this is not true of fieldwork in general, but especially where we work, there are a lot of challenges. So like, part of the thing is that we need to really prepare very well before we go, because there's no stores around, right? There's no like real infrastructure. Like, there are people that live in this area, but they like live in little huts, you know, so it's not like we can get things that we need. So there's a lot of planning that goes into it. Just getting to the field site itself is a huge challenge, because we're driving mostly on like dirt roads or off-road. And so we have a lot of flat tires that happen, and we have mechanics that come with us. And then just being in the field itself, it's extremely hot. The days are really long. A lot of times too, what happens is, you know, this is a really cool discovery that we made, but a lot of times we're just sort of walking around and looking for things. And, you know, a lot of days we're out there all day long, walking around in the heat, and we don't find much of anything. And so that's why when we find things like this, it's so exciting. I mean, it might sound a little bit cheesy, but if you are interested in doing science, follow your dream, right? It's not an easy path to take. And it's something that I think a lot of people don't quite understand, like why somebody would want to go into that. Or like, when I was in school and studying to become an anthropologist, a lot of times like my family members would ask me questions like, well, how are you going to make money? And how are you going to do these things? But if you let your passion drive you, you'll find a way to do it, right? It's not always going to be the easiest road, but there are ways to make a living doing the thing that you love to do. And for me, it's so valuable that I get to do something that I love to do every single day. So when I'm working, it doesn't even feel like work, right? And so that is something that I think is extremely valuable. There are programs that happen in museums, right? Or other sort of like outreach institutions. Like, there are a lot of outreach education institutions that a lot of kids don't really know about. And so a lot of times they have programs that students can be involved in. Like, museums sometimes will have classes that students can be involved in. Or different programs, like after-school programs. And because a lot of the stuff that we, like the sort of science that we do, is not something that's really taught in school, it's not something that kids are exposed to a lot. I mean, me as a kid, like, I had no idea that this was even a field of science. So I think if it's something that a kid is interested in, really the best thing to do would be to do some research and look into whether there are after-school programs or other programs, weekend programs, things that students can get involved in, because a lot of times those exist and people are just not aware of them.